Hello. Before we get started on this, I know my hair's a little crazy. I'm sorry. Got like a wing coming out of here and like a mohawk going on in the front. It's kind of crazy. So if you're watching the video, I was thinking about fixing it, and I was like, you know what? I can't make this look any better than it already looks. Um, so welcome to 99% Geek presents an audiobook theater podcast. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy, and this is being recorded on Sunday, February 28th, 2021 at 10:29 p.m. A.M. It's A.M. I mean, it might be 10:29 p.m. somewhere, but here it's 10:29 a.m. My goal in life has always been to write for television, but it's a goal I've had little luck so far in attaining, so instead I've resorted to self-publishing novels on Amazon, but writing the monthly chapters like episodes of TV shows that people can download at patreon.com/99geek. Every chapter is released in 4 parts, a teaser, and 3 acts, and every month features a different book spanning both science fiction and fantasy and every genre in between. That's right. I wrote all the books featured on this podcast, living off of employment insurance after being fired from working nights at a local gas station to make ends meet. I live in what feels like a poverty nightmare. Praying to God, I managed to make it as a writer, but for the night shift cognitively destroys me for good. I can feel it eating away at me year after year. If I could only find an audience or an agent or help of any kind, but I have nothing. No backup, and no support. I'm completely alone, pro bono, with nothing but my passion for telling stories, and thus I ask you not to judge me or my work or my production values too harshly. I'm doing the best I can with no money and no time. Tonight we'll be reading from Phase 2, the last chapter of Phase 2 of Season 1 of 99% Geek, a chapter of a book entitled Dakotah Slade. Um, Paranormal Detective or Paranormal Division. I was going to make a poll, but I forgot. I'm sorry. If you still want me to make that poll, comment. Or just comment on what you think is a better title. I'd really love to hear your opinions. Remember, you can follow along at patreon.com/99geek. Chapters are somewhat standalone, but at least make sure you start on week 1 for the recap. This is definitely not week 1. This is, in fact, week 4. This is chapter or episode number 5 of book title Dakotah Slade, Paranormal Something. And the chapter title is Everybody Hurts Part 2. And so we continue with week number 4. Anderson wiped the rain from his face with his similarly soaked sleeve and looked across the street at where Dakotah had 2 kids on the wet grass with her and was trying to get their mother to jump next. Only the woman didn't jump. As Anderson watched, bullets clanging against the body of his car, he watched the woman get pulled viciously back into the house. That's too much watched. Right before Anderson's eyes. Dang that. All right, we got this. Right before Anderson's eyes. Okay, only the woman didn't jump. Right before Anderson's eyes, bullets clanging against the body of his car, he watched the woman get pulled viciously back into the house. Much better. Sarah slammed into the car door beside him, taking cover with him as bullets continued to hail down at them. She gave Anderson a nod, and he risked a glance over his car trunk. As he watched, Yeager seemed to have seen the same thing Anderson did, and he gave Detective Richards another wave. This one was more a goodbye wave than a hello wave, and he backed away from the action as he did so, allowing his men to get in front of him and open fire at Anderson. Anderson dropped back down. He wanted to go after Yeager, but he knew what was more important. "We have to get into that house," he told Sarah, and she glanced up to read the scene. "There's 3 left," Sarah told Anderson after doing a mental count of the remaining black-clad gunmen. "Let's just move in now and take them out. You go right, I'll go left." "Wait," Anderson said with a better idea. "Let's throw them off a bit and cross. You go right, I'll go left." When it came to avoiding fire, Anderson had to assume anything he could do to confuse them more was something worth doing. Uh, there. They both got up, firing and then crossing each other. Anderson's chosen man was by a parked black SUV, likely the one he'd arrived in, and the vehicle was all shot up to hell. Anderson fired off 2 shots and missed, having to crouch back down behind the hood of his car as his target returned fire. Sarah, on the other hand, took out her guy by the tree, and then took cover in Anderson's old spot by the trunk as the third guy unloaded on her. Anderson released his clip and slapped in the last extra cartridge he had. Sarah looked across the length of his car at him, and he raised 2 fingers, pointing at her, and pointing over his head, then pointing at himself, and waving in her direction. She understood what he meant. He then raised 3 fingers, dropped one, dropped the other. As he dropped his last finger, they both stood up, coming around the car as they unloaded their guns at the 2 remaining gunmen. Like before, they crossed on the other side of the car, going for each other's man. As Anderson approached his guy, the shooter aimed at him and pulled the trigger. Dodging to the side, Richard's heart skipped a beat as he thought he'd get hit, but the shot ricocheted off the stop sign beside him. He emptied 2 more shots at the gunner, clipping him once in the shoulder, and then got close enough to kick the man back into a second SUV beside him. As the man collided with the side of the vehicle, leaving a bloody smear, he dropped his gun, and Anderson pointed his pistol at the man's head. "You're under arrest," Anderson told the man. "You have the right to remain silent. Everything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law." He kicked the man's gun away from his reach into a puddle and began cuffing him. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Looking over at Sarah, he saw that she too was out of ammo as she approached her guy behind a tree, getting close enough to slap the gunman's gun aside. He backed up and leveled his gun at her, but she slipped behind the tree just in time as a bullet thunked against the trunk. He came around the tree at her, and she managed to pin his gun to the tree. Despite not having a shot, the man emptied his clip as Sarah cuffed him across his masked face. That using the word cuffed is probably not a good idea there, considering people are cuffing people left and right. Cuffed in that specific situation, I meant punched. As Sarah, what's another word for punched? Should I just use punched? But Sarah, whatever, punched him across, struck. There we go. The man emptied his clip as Sarah struck him across his masked face. Kneeing him in his padded stomach, she then grabbed him and flipped him over her onto his back. Taking her cuffs, see, she's trying to use the word cuff in 2 different ways in the same paragraph? That's insane. Taking her cuffs, she followed Anderson's lead and cuffed the guy. Anderson was impressed, but he had to quickly duck as more gunfire came in from across the street at them. We took out all the gunmen," Detective Richards yelled over the SUV he now found himself using as cover. "You can seize your fire. It's just us police now." "Fuck the police!" the same voice yelled again. "Yeah," Sarah muttered, crouching beside Anderson. "That's getting a little old." Scene change. The gang member choking the life out of Claire looked so young, and even though Jeanne had a chance to shoot, she held off. "Damn it!" she cursed herself out, grabbing the kid instead. She tore him away from the rookie with one hand and slammed him into the parked car, placing her shotgun to the side of his head. "I'm getting real tired of this," she yelled out to the Blades gang gathered on the lawn before her. "We're here to help you, so drop the fucking guns!" The teen which she was holding raised his hands in surrender, and she lowered her shotgun. His fellow gang members in the yard, all seeing her ease up on their friend, stopped shooting their guns and lowered their weapons. "Thank you," Detective Jeanne yelled loudly as Richard stepped out from his cover across the street. "Now we want to enter the premises and make sure that everyone inside is okay. You all good with that?" No one said anything. "All right," she said. "Richards." Scene change. Cale threw West Paul's wife away from the window, the woman smashing through her daughter's bed as the wood splintered and gave way under her weight. "Do whatever you want with me," the woman said, pulling herself painfully out from the snapped bed frame and crawling along the floor. "You can't get to my children. They're beyond your reach." "I won," the woman said with false bravado. Cale crouched down in front of her. He said, fixing the collar on her shirt. She cringed away from his touch. "Shh. I want your territory and your people and their loyalty. I want you to sign it all away to me, or I promise you will never see your children again." He patted her on the head. "Kill me, and it all goes to them," she said with a laugh. She even stretched out her neck, as if daring him, as if he were some kind of vampire. Cale frowned. "Well, that," he told her, getting up from his crouched position in front of her. Doesn't help me at all. He looked out the window and saw the kids crossing the yard, Dakotah urging them to go faster. If I had your children, Kale suggested, trying to get them somewhere productive, would you consider negotiating with me? It really would be much easier on all of us if you just gave me what I want. The woman in front of him, beautiful but afraid, fell apart, weeping into her hands. Kale sighed. I'll be right back, he told her. You just stay there. He left the room and made for the stairs as she shrieked after him. No, please. If you hear those sirens, they're on my end, but you probably don't. Because the filter on this is really good, and even keep hearing my snaps. No, I was hearing something about it. Scene change. Anderson Richards was the first to the front porch, though everyone else was right on his tail. He bound up the front steps, tracking mud with his shoes as he burst through the door into the front hall. Standing on the stairs, 2/3 of the way down from the second floor, stood someone who could only be Dakotah's ex, Kale. It's you, Anderson managed to utter, really wishing he had more than 2 bullets left in his gun. You must be Dakotah's new friend, Kale said, almost as if excited to meet Anderson. He traced his finger along the banister as he continued to descend towards Detective Richards. You'll have to give her a message for me. Tell her I miss her. Anderson balled his hands into fists. I'm not letting you anywhere near her, he spoke defiantly. You monster. Kale rolled his eyes dramatically. More sirens. Something really horrible must be going on out there. Kale rolled his eyes dramatically. I'm not asking you to let me near her, he said, as if it was obvious. I'm asking you to deliver a message. Try and pay attention. Kale smacked the detective playfully on the cheek. This on a slight tap. Anderson brought up his gun. You have the right to remain You have the right to remain, he started to say, but before he could finish, Kale had grabbed his gun arm and twisted it aside. Anderson let off a shot into the wall. Come now, detective. Kale gloated calmly, twisting Anderson's arm the other way and making him fire his second shot into the stairs. You're making a fool of yourself. He pulled Anderson's gun from his hand, empty as it was, and tossed it aside. I expected better from a friend of Dakotah. Anderson raised his fist in front of his face. Kale smiled, and raised his fists too. This is good, Kale taunted, Anderson taking a step back. Your form is a little amateur, Kale criticized while studying the detective. But I respect your gumption. Anderson was acutely aware that he was blocking the door from letting anyone else in, and that they were all standing in the doorway watching the 2 men square off. He would just have to give them a show. Prove yourself, detective, Kale boasted. Prove yourself to me that you're worthy of spending time with my coda. He smiled. If you can make me bleed, I'll even let you fuck her. The fact he was talking about someone he claimed to love so cavalierly made Anderson's blood boil. The fact that he was talking about Dakotah had totally nothing to do about it at all. Anderson jabbed at Kale with a heavy punch, and Kale not only blocked the punch with his left arm, a bit of an awkward move for him, but then his right arm came up lightning fast to Anderson's elbow, and Kale dug his finger under the joint. Suddenly, Anderson's entire arm seared with agony as if it was on fire, dropping limp at his side. The pain was excruciating, and Anderson let out a scream. That was the ulnar nerve, Kale explained calmly, also known to many people as the funny bone, though it isn't very funny, or bone. Kale gave the detective a cruel smile, and Anderson swung out with his other arm, just hoping to wipe the smile off the man's face. Instead, Kale caught Anderson's arm and dug his open hand into Anderson's shoulder blade. Again, Anderson's arm immediately dropped limp, but this time the pain was even more excruciating and ran down his entire left side.
And that was your brachial nerve.
Brachial, sorry.
Your brachial nerve.
Kale gloated like he would know how to pronounce all these nerves. Anderson stumbled back and dropped to his knees. He tried to will his limbs to work, but it was as if his very body wasn't responding anymore. Kale grabbed Anderson by the chin roughly.
You know what? He said. I think I'll just deliver the message myself.
Anderson tried to say something back, tried to speak any words at all, but the pain had him beyond coherence.
My next blow,
Kale informed him,
will be to your trigeminal nerve.
Or trigeminal. He teed off on Anderson like his head was a golf ball.
If I don't do it just right, I could probably kill you. But if I get it, it's said to be the worst pain anyone can possibly feel. See, now I heard that was a point-blank shotgun blast to the head,
Jeanne muttered as she placed the barrel of her shotgun against Kale's head. She had snuck in on him as Anderson had finally stumbled away from the door. She pumped her shotgun loudly, the unused shell dropping to the floor. She still had 4 more.
You want to test who's right, Shia LaBeouf?
Kale let out a sigh.
Detectives. I have places I need to be,
he complained as if he was getting bored of playing with them. Detective Jian shrugged.
Well, you're just gonna have to cancel all your appointments, she boasted at him, because I'm taking you in.
No, you're not, Kale said with a laugh. No, not that laugh. Let's try that again.
No, you're not.
Yes, it's more of a, what do we call it? Lambert, Christopher Lambert. It's a Christopher Lambert laugh. That's what we're doing.
No, you're not.
Kale said with a laugh as his hand came up and caught her shotgun, twisting it away from his head. The shotgun went off and buried pellets into the side table beside Anderson. His eyes widened, trying as he could to move. He wanted to help Jian, but his limbs still wouldn't respond. As Anderson watched, Kale's leg came up, his knee striking Jian hard in the gut. As Jian tilted forward, Kale smashed her face in with her own shotgun. Finally, she let go, and Kale struck her across the face with the gun's handle. He turned to the door, where the surviving Blade's gang were piling in to get their turn on the white guy.
Come on, then,
Kale beckoned for them. There were at least 5 of them, assuming there weren't any more hiding outside somewhere. The first one that came at him got an immediate shotgun handle to the face and stumbled sideways right through the stair railing. The wood of the banister snapped and splintered as a man fell through it, hitting the stairs and rolling down. Flipping the gun in his hand, Kale tried to shoot the next guy, but his shot went past to hit Sarah Warley in the chest as she got to the doorway. The shotgun blast hit her dead on her bulletproof vest, and she was thrown from the doorway out into the lawn. Kale didn't have time to get off another shot, however, before he was tackled into the kitchen, dropping his shotgun as he disappeared from Anderson's view. Forcing himself back to his feet, Detective Anderson Richards willed himself to ignore the pain and stumble forward. It was just 1 foot, and then the next. He could do it. As he got to the door of the kitchen, he saw the Blade's gang member throw Kale against the stove. The man had a goatee, and Kale grabbed it with one hand as the man tried to throttle him. His other hand reached out behind him and turned on the stove. Kale's attacker dragged him along the kitchen counter and through the toaster oven to the sink, where Kale began spraying his attacker with water. While they were struggling, Anderson watched another Blades guardsman, this one wearing a Hawaiian shirt, sneak around into the living room, through the dining room, and into the kitchen from the side. Kale's attacker with the goatee released Kale and stepped back, grabbing a towel hanging on the cupboards and drying his face. As he did, Kale opened those cupboards and grabbed a frying pan, striking the goateed man across the head with the pan. The man fell to his knees, and Kale grabbed a pot with his other hand, bringing the 2 cast-iron kitchen utilities together on either side of the man's face. As the goateed man dropped to the floor,
Kale already had his attention on the man in the Hawaiian shirt. He dropped the pot he had in one hand and grabbed the sink hose instead, spraying the floor at his new attacker's feet. The man with the Hawaiian shirt ignored Kale's water hose and came at him with fists swinging. It was a bad move, as Kale blocked the jabs and easily threw the guy off balance. He slipped on the water and crashed to the kitchen floor on top of his partner. Anderson stumbled aside to allow the next Blade's gunman to pass, this one raising his Uzi to blow Kale away. He didn't even get the chance as Kale slid forward on the wet linoleum and slapped the man's Uzi out of his hands before kicking him through a pantry door into a mop closet. Grabbing a broom, the thug stepped out from the broom closet and jabbed the stick at Kale, who deflected it easily with his pan. The man lunged at him again, and this time Kale not only deflected it the other way, but he grabbed it with his free hand and brought it up to grapple his newest attacker by the neck. Pulling on the broom so hard against the man's neck that Kale snapped the broom in half, his attacker let go of it to reach instead for Kale's face. Kale impaled the broken half of the broom he still held through the attacker's hand. The Blade's thug stumbled away from Kale, screaming and grabbing at his wrist in shock. Ah! Kind of like that. He tried coming at Kale with his one good remaining hand, but Kale simply redirected his momentum towards the stove and pressed the man's good hand against the glowing element. The man screamed even louder than before, and slipped backwards on the puddle Kale had made earlier, slipping back. Nice, or you use the word slip there. Falling back. No, and then I use the word fall right after. Tipping back. So many synonyms in the world for other things. The man screamed even louder than before and slipped backwards on the puddle Kale had made earlier, tipping back to fall on top of his two buddies. Anderson painfully followed after Kale as he went into the dining room and found himself once more face to face with Detective Jian. The detective balled her fists and took a defensive stance, beckoning for Kale to come at her. But he didn't. Instead, he stomped on the rug beneath both their feet and yanked it out from under Jian, taking her off her feet and onto her back. Before she could even try to move, Kale grabbed a wooden dining chair by the spine and lifted it over his head to smash it down on Jian's body like it was a hammer at a test-your-strength carnival attraction. The chair shattered into pieces on impact, but Kale didn't even slow down from there. With the fifth and final surviving Blade's guard coming around at him with the shotgun he'd dropped, Kale grabbed a plate from the dining table and threw it at the final standing man. The plate knocked off the man's aim and he fired the shotgun into a glass display case. Kale kept grabbing items from the table and throwing them, plates, cups, utensils. He then crossed the room while he had the chance, grabbing a flower vase on a table that separated the living room from the dining room. He tossed the flower vase last, and the item striking against the thug's face and giving him the time he needed to close the final distance, and giving Kale the time he needed to close the final distance. Kale smacked the man's shotgun aside, and the man fired the final shot into the couch. As Kale got his hands around the thug's waist and suplexed him through the living room coffee table. Putting his hand on a broken piece of the table, Cable forced himself to his feet, his shoe crunching on broken glass. His final attacker tried to get to his feet as well, but Kale grabbed the large flat screen against the wall and broke it over his attacker's head. Anderson, able to curl his fingers again, stumbled after Kale as the man made it to the door to come face to face with Claire. Her one arm was in a sling, and the other was pointing her pistol at Kale. She opened her mouth to tell him to freeze, but before she got the word out, he'd already grabbed her gun arm and held it wide. He then grabbed her other arm, tearing it from her sling and holding her up by her arms almost like a marionette. She screamed in agony, and he headbutted her square in the face. "Claire!" Detective Jian yelled, getting to the kitchen doorway. Kale flung Claire across the front hall to collide with Jian as she tried to come at the man for a third time. The two women collapsed as the detective... Claire! Detective Jian yelled, getting to the kitchen doorway. Kale flung Claire across the front hall to collide with Jian as the detective tried to come at the man for a third time. Water break. Water break. The two women collapsed in a heap in the hallway as Anderson followed Kale to the porch. Kale stopped on the porch, and for a moment Anderson wondered why. You just don't know when to give up, do you? He asked, turning around to Anderson in the front doorway. Anderson's arms, finally willing to move, but still feeling like spaghetti, raised to challenge Kale, though he knew he wouldn't last another round. I kind of like that about you, Kale said with a smile. Sure enough, Kale's strike went straight through Anderson's defense, moving like a bullet and striking Anderson straight in the center of his chest. And that, my friend, was your solar plexus, Kale informed Anderson as he dropped to his knees, gasping for air, his entire upper body seizing up. Kale grabbed the side of Anderson's head and plowed it through the wooden porch banister beside them. As Anderson's vision went black, the last thing he heard was Kale whispering in his ear. You gave a good show. Scene change. Good job, Wednesday Addams, the teen kid complained to Dakotah as they reached the fence at the far end of their yard. You've led us to a dead end. Have you never climbed a fence before? Dakotah asked, looking the teen over with a judgmental raised eyebrow. He sure seemed strong enough to climb a fence with broad athletic shoulders. Oh, we can't reach, he said, and he had a point. The fence was abnormally high for a suburban fence. And I know your fat ass ain't climbing jack shit. And I know your fat white ass ain't climbing jack shit. You know what? Dakotah said, putting a finger in the kid's face. There's such a thing as reverse racism. No, there ain't, the boy argued. My mom says reverse racism is just a thing, it's just something white people whine about when they can't take as good as they give. Yeah, well, Dakotah muttered, your mother doesn't know everything. She made a cup with her hand. Okay, I'm going to boost you onto this fence, and then you're going to sit on it while I pass your sister up to you. The teen boy stepped up to her, tears welling in his eyes. You know, my mother could be dead, he said, seeming about to cry. Yeah, well, newsflash, I'm a bitch, Dakotah said. Now come on. She chided him, and the boy placed a foot in her hand. It was slippery from the muddy grass, but Dakotah lifted with everything she had as the boy gave a jump, and together they got him to the top of the fence. He grabbed the top and pulled himself up, reaching down at Dakotah once he was steady. Pass me my sister, he called to her. Dakotah started lifting the little girl up when she heard a noise behind them. Why don't you just put the girl down? Jaeger's voice spoke up, and Dakotah looked over her shoulder to see Jaeger standing just 4 feet away, watching with bemused interest. Why don't you put the gun down? Dakotah suggested instead. Jaeger thumbed his rifle and took a small step forward. I think I've got the leverage here, he pointed out to her. She lowered the girl to the ground, less because he wanted her to, and more so that she could reach her hand into her purse. She was careful not to turn around, lest he see what she was reaching for. That's a good little witch, Jaeger muttered, taking another step forward. Dakotah scrunched her face up in confusion, though she was still facing away from him. Why do people have such a problem with goths today? She asked as Jaeger put his hand on her shoulder and tried to turn her around. Dakotah pulled her switchblade from her purse, turning with his arm and slashing at the crook of his elbow. He flinched back, and Dakotah barely nicked his forearm. Whoa there, little lady, he said with a gruff laugh. You sure do have some fight in ya. Pretty face, too. I'm not letting you touch these children, Dakotah growled at him, holding her knife up and keeping the girl behind her. Actually, I actually have a plan for this, Jaeger said. You see, I figured I'd just kill you, and then I'll be able to touch the children all I want. He considered his words and quickly added, not like in a gross way, just so we're clear. I have a better plan. Kale's voice spoke from behind Jaeger, and the large man turned in surprise. Kale must have approached while Jaeger blocked Dakotah's view of the yard, because she never saw him coming. And without another word, Dakotah placed his Desert Eagle against Jaeger's kneecap and pulled the trigger. The sound echoed like a firecracker as the old man's knee burst, and he dropped to the floor, screaming in agony, holding his leg to his chest. The girl behind Dakotah screamed, and together they backed up until their backs touched the fence. Kale crouched down with him. Kale crouched down beside Jaeger. Kale crouched down beside Jaeger. Sorry. I have to re-chain the sentence. Waiting for the man's screams to turn to whimpers. Kale crouched down beside Jaeger, waiting for the man's screams to turn to whimpers. No one threatens my Coda. Do you understand? Fuck you! Jaeger swore up at Kale, his face screwed up in agony. As Dakotah watched, she felt something brush her hair, and she looked up to see the teen boy reaching down. While Kale and Jaeger were distracted, Dakotah handed the little girl up to her brother. Go! Dakotah yelled at them. Find a way to circle around and get back to your mother. The boy and his sister disappeared from view. Coda! Nope, wrong voice. Coda! There, that's better. Kale's voice spoke, and he had finally turned his attention on her. And then I lost where I was. Okay, here we go. She waited for him to strike her, or try to hurt her in some way. His cold blue eyes stared out at her from his sullen, shaven face, as Jaeger screamed in agony behind him. As Jaeger moaned in agony behind him. Let me try the sentence again. His cold blue eyes stood out at her from his sullen, shaven face as Jaeger moaned in agony behind him. And then he offered her his Desert Eagle. Yes, okay, let's try the whole paragraph again. She waited for him to strike her, or try to hurt her in some way. His cold blue eyes stared out at her from his sullen, shaven face as Jaeger moaned in agony behind him. And then he offered her his Desert Eagle. You took it from me, Kale told her, and used it to capture Jaeger. You won't be able to explain the wound in his leg otherwise. Dakotah looked at Kale's gun, but dared not reach out to take it. I don't understand, Dakotah muttered, looking up at her ex confused. Kale didn't relent, literally pressing his pistol into her hand. I'm giving it to you, Kale explained to her. They'll make you an honorary deputy for this. I don't understand, Kale repeated as Kale circled her. I don't understand, Dakotah repeated as Kale circled her, tracing his finger down her arm. I'm not letting you near those children. Kale's hand moved across her body, groping at her breast from behind, and then moving to her chin as he came around in front of her again. He seemed to be considering something. Finally, he spoke again. I used the word again too many times. Finally, he spoke once more. Fine, he said. They're all yours. What? Dakotah asked in surprise, and he kissed her. Deeply, passionately, holding her face up to his, as his other hand pressed her body against his body. She tried to resist, tried to pretend she didn't want it, but his touch felt so familiar. His taste, his hand reaching under her shirt, under her bra, fingers brushing past her nipple. Oh God, she wanted him. More than she'd ever wanted anything in the world. More than drugs, more than a cigarette. I would never do anything to upset you, he promised Dakotah as their lips parted. She was out of breath, and still she wanted more. Her mouth reached out, begging for another taste. Everything I've done, Kale whispered to Dakotah, has been for us. He came in to kiss her again, but this time she pulled away from him. Even sleep with my best friend? She asked him. He smiled. You'll see. His left hand was snaking its way into her pants, but his right hand grabbed something from her bag, a scarf. He wrapped it around her eyes playfully as he circled behind her once more. She could feel his lips caress her neck. She could also feel the fingers of his left hand lightly tease the lips of her pussy. I love you, he whispered. Excuse me, water break. Sorry if that was very not erotic the way I just said the word pussy. So let's say it again. Starting at the beginning of this paragraph, she could feel his lips caress her neck. She could also feel the fingers of his left hand lightly tease the lips of her pussy. I love you. That sounded too much like Jaeger. I love you, he whispered in her ear, and I'm going to prove to you that we're endgame. He kissed her lips one more time as she turned her head towards him. You need to go, she purred, hating the words that were coming out of her mouth. They're going to come. They'll catch you. She felt his hand snake away from her waist. No, they won't, Kale said, and he sounded further away. I'm already gone. He finished with a distant whisper, and the scarf fell from her eyes. She looked around the yard, but Kale was nowhere to be found. It was just her, alone, with Jaeger. He'd even taken the rifle. She heard a strange noise and looked down at the wounded man. Jaeger looking back up at her and seeming to be laughing. All right, let's try that again. It was just her, alone, with Jaeger. Kale had even taken the rifle. She heard a strange noise and looked down at the wounded man. Jaeger looking back up at her and seeming to be laughing. What do you find so funny? She asked him, and the man What do you find so funny? She asked him, the man guffawing despite his obvious agony. You'll probably never walk again. I'm sorry, he said, trying to contain his laughter. It's just... Look who's playing both sides now. Again he laughed, more heavily even than before, and laughed, and laughed. A deep belly laugh, all while cradling his leg and writhing back and forth in agony. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. I don't remember saying the line that totally sets up the beginning of this. Did I somehow cut it? Because there was a really cool line where he hands her the gun. Ah, yeah, they'll make you an honorary deputy for this. Yes. Remember when he said that? Anyway, scene change done. We're in the next scene. It is with great pleasure that I today swear in Dakotah Slade as an honorary officer of the law, Mayor Sylvia Gray said from her podium in front of a crowd of people and press that had gathered at the Mississauga City Hall. Dakotah. On the stage with the mayor was Police Chief Harrington in her wheelchair, and behind them was a row of chairs where Sarah, Claire, Jeanne, Anderson, and finally Dakotah sat facing the crowd. As the mayor turned to face Dakotah, she glanced at Anderson, who nodded and pushed for her to get out of her seat. Awkwardly, she got to her feet and approached the podium. Water break. You deserve this, the mayor told her. the old gray-haired woman, looking Dakotah in her eyes and giving her a warm smile. By showing bravery this morning, both in protecting those children, as well as subduing and apprehending a known fugitive of the law. Do you accept? Mayor Gray asked Dakotah. I do, Mayor, Dakotah said with a nod, trying to keep a large grin from spreading on her face. The mayor lifted up a book between them. Well, then put your hand on this Bible and repeat after me. Dakotah did as she was told. I solemnly swear. I solemnly swear. That I will be loyal to Canada and that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada. That I will be loyal to Canada and that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada. And that I will, to the best of my ability. And I will, to the best of my ability. Discharge my duties as a member of the Peel Police Services Board. Discharge my duties as a member of the Peel Police Services Board. Faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or by law. Faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw. So help me God. So help me God. Officer Dakotah Slade, you are now an honorary officer of the law. You may sit down. Everyone applauded politely. No one applauding harder than Anderson. But she also noticed a bit of a smile on Sarah's lips, too. Officer Sarah Warley, the mayor spoke next. Please rise. Sarah's eyes widened, not expecting to be called on, and approached the podium confused. As she walked, she cradled her stomach, having sustained a couple broken ribs from the siege. For what? Sarah started to say, but she didn't finish, going speechless. For your bravery shown this morning, the mayor said with a smile, as well as the initiative you showed in heading the case. I present you with a promotion to detective. The mayor lifted the box within which sat Warley's new badge. For taking one for the team, the mayor added last, Sarah wincing as she reached for it. You deserve this. You earned it. Sarah lifted the badge from the case, showing it off to everyone, and then hugging it to herself. She looked like she was going to cry, but she kept it together until she made it back to her seat. Finally, the mayor said, before we continue with the subject of this press meeting, I want to present every one of these people on the stage with a medal of bravery and a key to the city. Everyone got up off their chairs, Sarah having just sat down, and standing together they all looked worse for wear. Clara's arm was back in her sling, and Jeanne had a cane. Anderson was covered in cuts and bruises, as well as a swollen black eye, and Sarah looked like she hurt just trying to stand. Chief Harrington wheeled to each of them, and they knelt down for her to pin the medal to their shirts and put a key in their hands. We can all feel safer knowing that they are watching the streets, the mayor said into her microphone, and the people applauded. Woo! Woo! It's like the end of Star Wars. Nope, I was doing the wrong. Anyway. I might get pinged for imagine I get a fucking copyright ping because I'm
Dun dun dun. This is a Star Wars scene. Where were we? We can all feel much safer knowing that they're watching the streets and people are applauding. But then one person says, here come. I have to pull out all the voices today. All right, here we go. Can we? Said one voice out from the media. A hand shot up, and the mayor pointed at the reporter. She stood up, a woman of mixed Asian heritage and a thick British accent. Can we really feel safe? Isabel Tsung, Voice News. You'll have to excuse me if I seem a little jet lagged, as I just got off a plane and I've had quite the week. Go ahead, Isabel, the mayor said, waving for her to continue. It just seems to me, Mayor, Isabel carried on, that the world is becoming more and more a dangerous place. Sorry. Let me do this whole line again. You know what? Water break. It seems to me, Mayor, Isabel carried on, that the world is becoming more and more a dangerous place. Between the vampires and the magic, and children being trapped in their school and hunted by a monster, are we really to believe that the police can handle these kinds of threats? The mayor let the reporter's words sink in for a second. You're right, the mayor said at last. Which is why I'm starting a specialized paranormal division within the Peel Police District, equipped and suited for dealing with these types of extraordinary circumstances that are becoming more and more the normal in the world. Everyone applauded, even the people on stage, the announcement being news to everyone in attendance but the mayor herself. Detective Richards and Officer Slade will be leading the district, and they'll be allowed to build their team from there, the mayor explained the details. It's my hope that our paranormal division will one day be renowned as the best in the world. Today, we live in a dangerous world, but tomorrow we can build ourselves a safer one. Together. Thank you. Scene change. Scene change. Scene change. I feel like I need to change one of those worlds. Best on the globe, maybe. It's my hope that our paranormal division will one day be renowned as the best on the globe. Today we live in a dangerous world, but tomorrow we can build ourselves a safer one together. Thank you. I should write speeches. No, I shouldn't, obviously. Scene change. I already did that. Okay, cool. We're three of them. We're in a whole new place, whole different time. Not that different of a time, because basically next act is going to start right where this act ends. So technically same day, probably same morning. But we're on to Kale. Are you sure? Kale asked the person on the other end of his call. The person confirmed the information, and Kale shut his cell phone, returning to his associates, his footsteps crunching on the gravel of the abandoned lot. With the resources and funding you've provided me, he told his associates, nodding at the one he knew well, we should have no problem reaching your target distribution. Kale crossed his arms, the sun beaming down on his face and making him squint his eyes as he addressed the two men. As for the machine, he continued, this lot should be the perfect location, right in the center of the city. I've already got my realtor signing on all the necessary documents. We could start building by tomorrow. He turned to look out at the empty square lot. Won't this site just be perfect, Mr. Dalish? The leader of the Tempest cult, a broad-shouldered, muscular man with graying hair, a weathered face, and a thick Australian accent, stepped forward and nodded his approval to Kale. Yes, he spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. Yes, it will. He turned to the third man of their group. Don't you agree, Mr. President? President of the United States, Robert Daggers, a man with dark hair and even darker eyes, gave a nod of his own. Yes,
he said in a silky smooth, deep voice. Yes, it will. Next time on Dakotah Slade Paranormal Division in Phase 4 of 99% Geek Season 1 on 99geek.ca. It might be a situation where, like, how Suburban Fantasy is Urban Fantasy Season 1, but it's really just called Suburban Fantasy, and then the name changes to Urban Fantasy in Season 2. So it could be, it's Dakotah Slade Paranormal Detective for Act 1, and then Act 2, suddenly it's going to be Paranormal Division. Sorry. Next time, though, on Dakotah Slade Paranormal Division in Phase 4 of 99% Geek Season 1 on 99geek.ca. In the second and climactic in the second and climactic act of Dakotah Slade, she and Anderson will have a lot on their plate, starting up a new division of the police force. Things will definitely become more than they can handle as events in urban fantasy threaten to spill over, and in the chaos, Kale makes his move and reveals his grand plan. Both urban fantasy and Dakotah Slade will return and cross over. And repeatedly cross over. In 2022. There's going to be a big event thing with that. But anyway, next month on Royals, for March 2021 at patreon.com/99geek for the first chapter of Phase 3. I'm super excited. This has been a long time coming. There's going to be a lot of changes coming, I think. I'm possibly even thinking about music. I mean, I can play guitar technically, so I could try to come up with something. It won't be good, but I can come up with something. So I'm thinking about it. We'll see. It's just I hate the more things I add to this, the more complicated it gets to do. And when it's simple, I can just kind of wake up, and power my way through it, and then kind of move on with my day. Because admittedly, the writing is my strength. This is kind of me going out of my box here. I don't know how much the podcast will change, and also there's a possibility that I will lose the feed, so that sucks. But I mean, now that I'm doing this video, I can keep doing the video stuff, and even if I lose the the archive of my feed, I think I can still keep running a smaller, like maybe like 20 episodes up at a time or something like that. And it might work out for the better because I think my earlier stuff is weaker than my later stuff anyway. So I hope you enjoyed this chapter. I feel maybe the end was a little rushed, but I don't know. I feel like as a whole, the chapter is all right and pretty good. Maybe I don't know. It's hard. I can't tell. I don't know. I wish people would tell me. Tell me these things or review them on Amazon or post comments or something. Because I don't know. For all I know, this is the worst writing in the world. I can't tell. I just can't tell. I need other people to tell me these things. God, I wish people would talk to me. No one talks to me. Just talk to me. If you're out there and you're listening and you care and you're still following along for more than like 10 episodes, then tell me. Let me know. It would do so much to make me feel better. But anyway, don't close down the episode because I'm about to, for the first time, reveal the plot of this new book that we're starting in Phase 3 of 99% Geek. We're starting 2 new books, but this is the plot of this one, and I'm very excited for it. All right, here we go. It's tentatively titled Royals. Caldine is a dying world. The gods, once benevolent and watching over the human paradise, are locked in a heavenly conflict with the demons from below. The effects on this world are clear. The natural resources are dwindling, and sea level has risen to where there is only one remaining landmass. Animals have mutated into monsters. Demons have mixed with men to create orcs, goblins, and other twisted races. There is only one large city, the royal city of Dunkel, and it's a scary sight to see. Inhabited by powerful royals who get magical powers and minions from their allegiances with the demons below. That is a. You are absolutely right. That is a fragment. Inhabited by powerful royals who get magical powers and minions from their allegiance with the demons below. Their city. I have no idea how to make that. We're gonna do this. There is only one large city, the royal city of Dunkel, and it's a scary sight to see. Inhabited by powerful royals who get magical powers and minions from their allegiance to the demons below. The city is
What else can I say about the city? It's a scary. I already say that. Yeah. Who cares? I'll fix this after. Their city contains large, imposing castles, some floating high in the sky, vicious, brutal armies, and mad displays of power. There's a never-ending struggle for influence. Can I make that somehow part of the other thing? Um yeah, okay, I got it. I got it. I can figure it out. Do 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 do. All right, here. Now the whole thing is a what? There is only one large city, the royal city of Dunkeld, and it's a scary sight to see. Inhabited by powerful royals who get magical powers and minions from their allegiances with the demons and demons below, comma again. Okay. All right. Inhabited by powerful royals who get magic. Nope, it still doesn't work. uh, Anyway, there's a never-ending struggle for influence there between the lower royals and the higher royals in the royal council. One sign of power is the number of slaves each royal has. The remaining humans in the world live in poverty-stricken towns throughout the surrounding wilderness, and the royals often leave Dunkel to cull more slaves from the poor villages. Everyone is a slave to someone. The poor are slave to the rich. Both are slaves for the royals. The lower royals are slaves to the higher royals, and they are slaves to the royal council. And the royal council is a slave to the demons, and the demons are slaves to their nature. I really thought that would read better. I'm really gonna have to work on that. So the first introduction did not go well, but hopefully the book will be better written. All right. Until then, let's go to the part where I say things and you listen, which has been this entire process really. But um, where are the words that I speak? Wasting time. Do do do. That's not the right one. Do do do. D D. Everything's going so slow. And here we go. My name is Andrew Geczy. My brand is 99% Geek, found at 99geek.ca. I'm a writer writing monthly chapters of novels like episodes of TV shows, releasing them in 4 weekly parts, a teaser and 3 acts on Sundays on my Patreon page at patreon.com/99geek. At the end of the month, the finished chapter is added to the PDFs attached at the bottom of every post. Finally, the finished books are self-published on Amazon. There's urban fantasy tales about a teenage girl turned into a vampire against her will, or a scorned lover investigating paranormal phenomena, or a journalist covering news and politics in the Middle East. There's a sci-fi story about people on a dying world trying to build a ship to a new one. There's a fantasy story about a fallen angel trying to stop the end of the world, and there's more coming. Kind of like the one I tried to introduce here. And it's all attached to the bottom of every post on the site in convenient PDF format, readable on computers, tablets, ebook readers, and phones. I also have a Geekly Weekly blog and host video game playthroughs and matchmaking streams on Twitch, and eventually post them on my YouTube and Patreon pages. So stay tuned and maybe subscribe. It's only $1, and the support you show will go a very long way, I promise. There are also higher tiers. Give $5 one month, and you can name a character or location or suggest a thing you might want to see. Basically, you get to give a noun, and then I promise to incorporate that noun into one of my stories somehow. Maybe not the same month you give the suggestion, but within one cycle of books, guaranteed. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me. When I say one cycle of books, I mean like, as in like within. You know how I go one chapter of Aldon Chronicles, one chapter of Adrift Homeless, one chapter of Urban Fantasy, then go back to one chapter of Aldon Chronicles, one chapter of Adrift Homeless, one chapter of Urban Fantasy. So within one of those cycles, so like not like within a year and a half, like not within 15 months, but within 3 months or 5 months or however long the cycle is, depending on how many books I'm working on at once. So 3 is probably going to be the going forward. So within 3 months, I'm going to be rewriting this anyway. All of this, I promise. Or if you give $10, you get 2 nouns. Is that where I am? Yes. No matter how crazy, you can't sabotage me, I promise. You can keep giving nouns for every month you pay at the $5 tier. Or if you give $10, you don't give 2 nouns, but you can give a description. Describe the personality of your character, or the look of your location, or the importance of your item. For $10, you get a noun and a description. You can also give $1 towards supporting my efforts at video game streaming or my weekly blog. If you don't want to subscribe on Patreon, you can also give at paypal.me/99geek, and for a limited time, the same rules apply about suggesting a noun there, blah, blah, blah. You can write it below your very contribution, and currently it's all going towards the podcast feed, but I haven't gotten anything, so that's a dead end. I'm as poor as it gets, living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes starving, so I understand if you are too. I don't want to take food out of your mouth, so your attention is enough. Say something, comment here. At the very least, follow me on Twitter at Andrew Geczy or Instagram at WingcommanderIV or email me at aldon@gmail.com. Live long and prosper. May the force be with you. Long live Marceline the Vampire Queen. We are the 99% Geek. All right. Stop.